Hello, my friends. How nice to be back again, sharing questions and answers. I know we have a lot of questions, as we always do. You know, it is the kinds of questions that you're all asking and that I'll do my very best to answer that brought me to the life that I'm living today and have been living for really since I was 20. The human life has a real purpose, and that is an expansion of awareness, a deepening of understanding, a growing in wisdom, and more effective answers to the most basic questions, which is what brings happiness and what causes suffering. And I was born myself really from a child. I was always asking the really big questions. Why are we here? What are we doing here? And above all, how can we be happy? And I was very frustrated, really. Well, I would say more, I was astonished that in my education and the society around me, people were neither asking nor answering those questions. They were just dealing with the surface of things. And I was 18. I'd gotten all the way to being 18 before I was introduced to the teachings of India. Not first with the path that I'm presently on, but one very close to it, in which for the first time I was being offered what I felt was true wisdom. And I just never looked back. This is what matters, not how happy, how comfortable we can be, how much we can be admired by the people around us. The reality is, who am I inside, and how can I gain mastery over that experience? And when I came to Ananda, when I met Swami Kriyananda when I was 22, in 1969, which yes, was a long time ago now, I felt for the first time I was meeting someone who really had the answers to the kinds of questions I wanted to have answered. And I didn't know at that time if I would run through it quickly. I wasn't very old, but I'd already run through a number of other things that should have lasted longer. But once I became immersed in the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, from Autobiography of a Yogi through Swami Kriyananda, his disciple, there hasn't, and I mean this literally, there hasn't been a serious question that I've asked or been asked where there wasn't a profound answer in the context of these teachings. It's very simple. It's a way of life. It's an understanding of the nature of life that is not always easy to live up to, and is not simple to understand, and is not necessarily within your grasp in an hour or two, but it has the kind of depth that you can, as I have, devote a lifetime to practicing, gaining some mastery, gaining some understanding, and feeling in the midst of this ever-increasing chaos of a society that we live in, that there's a pole star. And if we guide our lives by that pole star, it will take us to where we really want to be. So let's see what we can do to answer some of your questions.
Okay, Asha, first question is how to have hope and joy when you're dealing with a painful disease?
It's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, when your inner experience is dominated by physical pain, the physical body has such a hold on our attention. It takes a great deal of practice and willpower to be able to go beyond it. So the first thing I would say is you have to accept the fact that this is challenging karma. Now, karma is unlearned lessons in life, meaning that there is some potential for you to expand your consciousness by going through this experience with a desire to learn, rather not merely a desire to escape or a sense of anger that life is treating me this way. So hope, let's work with that word first. It's interesting, my own name, Asha, is a Sanskrit name, a common name in India, but it was gifted to me not by my mother, but by my spiritual teacher, Swami Kriyananda. and it means hope. It's a very simple name, very simple meaning. And I've thought a lot about that word hope, naturally, because I've had this name for 50 years. And hope, in a very real sense, is proof of the presence of God within us. Because there is something in us that always believes that whatever difficulty or suffering I'm facing now, it's not my final destiny. But the difficulty with hope, in that sense, is the subject of time. Because when we have hope, we naturally want that hope to be fulfilled soon. And if we find ourselves in a body that is determined to go through these physical difficulty, we cannot make our standard that circumstances are going to change. So see, this brings us back to a much deeper issue, which is, what is the reality of my life, and which aspect of my life can I control? If you really think about it, everything that you experience, we live inside our bodies, but what we actually experience is the consciousness we have in the midst of everything. Whether or not we respond to life in a happy or a sad way can be catalyzed by those circumstances, but where the experience always takes place is inside. So when we ask for the question of hope, it has to do with our entire worldview. You know, is life only the day-to-day experience I'm having now, or is this a chapter in a much longer story in which I am heading for a very different conclusion, and this is just the mountain that I'm climbing now? Someone who trains for the Olympics, a great deal of their training time is unpleasant, even intensely painful for them. But the pain is purposeful because they know it's taking them to a goal that they want. So one of the things that you need to explore is, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of pain? What is the possibility of learning and growing from pain? What kind of self-mastery can I develop even when circumstances are very contrary to what I think I need? And there's no quick answer to that. It requires a complete study of the meaning of life, to be in the company of those who have been through very difficult circumstances. How did they master it? What carried them through? How did they feel the power and the presence of God even in the midst of such challenging circumstances? I'm just pointing you in the right direction, because that's the only way I can think of this. There was a period of time in my life when I made a habit of reading many, many stories about extremely challenging circumstances that people had faced and turned into inner strength. And it was self-evident why I was reading such things, even though my life outwardly was not that challenging. There was this karmic necessity on my part, as much as possible, to gain hope that no matter what the challenge, there was always a way to turn it into inner strength. So I would suggest you make a serious study of that in whatever way appeals to you, to find the light in the darkness. And then whichever road seems most compatible with you, to start training yourself. Because there are many, many practices for developing inner awareness that will eventually enable you to, if not forget about your outer circumstances, at least have parallel universes, so that you can live more in an inner world and not always be defined by what's going on outwardly. Okay?
Thank you, Asha. The next question from someone in the live audience: how can you prove reincarnation is true?
Oh, well, many people remember their past lives. Many children remember their past lives. And we don't always take the children seriously, but it's so. I remember a little boy was being scolded by his father because he kept spilling the milk at the dinner table, literally. And the little boy looked at his father and he said, when you were the baby and I was the daddy. I didn't get mad at you. And it's easy to just dismiss that, but it's also true. There's many stories these days. You can just simply look it up. True life stories of past life memories. You know, a little girl in India, a very famous story, and she kept insisting that she belonged in another household, and she went there and the wife in that household had died, and she knew where in the fireplace the brick was loose and that all the money was hidden. And she led them all to all the money. I mean, those are just two random ones that I remember. The other side of it is, okay, that's the sort of fun side of it. There's many psychics who will tell you things, and there's many, many stories where there's been objective proof that a person knew something. Oh, there was one, as I recall reading, of a man who'd been murdered, and the murderer had gotten away with it, and so the man led them to where his body was buried. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's marvelously, it's great drama, but you can just dismiss it as entertainment if you want. But let me tell you how I dealt with this. I was introduced to the idea of reincarnation just before I was 20. I grew up in the United States in a Jewish family. There was no context of reincarnation, and this was, of course, you know, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, and none of this Indian influence was there. It just simply didn't exist. But when the idea of reincarnation was presented to me because of my past lives, because of my past lives of studying and practicing these teachings, I was inclined to accept, not reject it. However, I have a very strong and inquiring mind, and merely because a great teacher said this to me did not tell me immediately that it was true. But what I did was I began trying to understand otherwise inexplicable experiences I was having or observations I was making around me, and I kept testing the concept of reincarnation. How would that explain in a better way what I was experiencing than not having the idea of reincarnation? You know, love at first sight. Just meeting someone and just knowing someone. I met someone, and 15 minutes after we met, we were just absolutely the closest friends and just remained so. There was no warm up to it. There was no needing to know something. It was literally, oh, there you are. And just the context was there. Sometimes it's a romantic relationship. Sometimes it's just a friend or a sister or whatever it might be. Many mothers say that when their newborn is put into their arms, they recognize each other. So you can, again, give it lots of explanations, but what if the obvious explanation is that this is simply a chapter book that we're living? It's not one short little story. It's not something where you start when you're born and you end with when you die. Nothing comes before and nothing comes after. What if it's a chapter book? Oh, in this particular incarnation, I am Asha. I was born in the United States. I'm 78 years old now. I've had these particular experiences, but there was a whole lot of this one that happened before, and when I step out of this body, I'm not going to cease to exist. The essential vibration of my consciousness will stay with me, and I will go on with that. I may put it into another body, into another culture, but the essential who I am will be there. So just try it out. When you see people who are born fortunate, when you see people who are born with challenges, when your life goes well, when your life goes badly, ask yourself, could there be, if I could step out a little bit from this and see causes of energy that were not fulfilled in one incarnation, but those causes are still going forward, maybe causes that I got away with things that I should have been held accountable for, or maybe I put out a lot of good energy, but it never really came together, but sort of I'm starting with momentum this time. And after years, literally, I was inclined to believe it, but it became so much, it made life so much more sensible, so much which just didn't seem fair, or didn't make any sense, or why am I having to go through this hard trial? You know, if this is training for the next life, if this is payback for something that I haven't done yet, if this is me trying to build my energy so that the next time I'll have power when I'm born, just what is otherwise just a complete mystery just becomes a very orderly, somewhat predictable, not always to my liking, but nonetheless it all begins to make sense. Even children are so much stronger. They have these tiny bodies and they may not be able to communicate, but they are so much themselves. Mothers who have birthed more than one baby will say, from conception, somebody was in my womb. I mean, that it was a real personality. And the personalities of children, the interests, the inclinations of children raised exactly the same way in the same family can be so different. When I was 10 years old, I remember declaring to my parents in what must have been tremendously amusing to them, but I simply knew was true. I just said, essentially, I am who I am. And I'm small, and I was a small 10-year-old even for that. My father was a big man. He could have picked me up and carried me anywhere. I was completely at their mercy. I couldn't go off and live an independent life. But inside myself, I absolutely knew that they influenced me, but they did not define me. That I was self-defined at the age of 10. And it was a fact. Because I didn't start, I wasn't really 10. I was countless lifetimes old. I remember Swami Kriyananda was visiting our school, our elementary school. And he was already, relatively speaking, elderly, and had white hair and had the characteristics of an elder man. And one of the little children became extremely fascinated by him. Now, this is my belief, she could feel that despite what his body looked like, his consciousness just felt very, very different. And she kept edging closer and closer to him. And finally she got very close and she looked right at him and she said, "How old are you anyway?" Just like that. She was a very strong-minded, feisty child. And Swami just looked at her as he does. He didn't see her as a child, he just saw her as herself. So he said, "Let me put it this way. When I was a little boy, you were an old woman." And she looked kind of puzzled for a minute. And then you could see like a light bulb went off in her mind. And because she was in our environment, the concept of reincarnation was not completely new to her. But she just got it. She was very happy and she walked away. I mean, it answered the question. Like, what is going on here? Well, I'll tell you what's going on here. This is a long journey. This is likely not the first time that we've met. Just try it. Just experiment with it. And read interesting stories, because that's also fun. But start practicing. If it were true, how would that explain this? How would reincarnation fit into this story? It's much, much, much more interesting than really, in my belief, any other way of looking at it.
Thank you, Asha. There are a lot of questions here today. So next one will be, when everything is God's plan, how should we perceive or act on the suffering of others?
It always comes down to the suffering of others. It always comes down to the word suffering. It just always. We start out wanting to believe in God. We have a thought in our mind about a loving divine mother. It just appeals to our hearts so much. And we want to say everything resolves in bliss and everything happens for the best. I mean, you've heard it all. And then you look and then you see people who are suffering. Either, in massive, calamitous global ways, or, your next door neighbor or your friend or somebody in your family who's just caught up in a karma that's causing them great misery. I mean, we have drug addiction and just countless things. So first of all, it's an interwoven web. And even though because of our bodies, it's our bodies that give us the impression that we're really separate from each other, but in a very real sense, it's like the fingers of the hand. When you live at the external edge, there seems to be these great gaps between us. When you go deeper into the depths of the source of your own being, you discover that we're all emanating from the same source. We're all expressions of the same divinity. We're all waves on the same ocean of spirit, rays of the same light. I mean, there's countless ways to say it. So this empathy that we feel for other people is deep and genuine, because there is a point of unity. Their suffering is not separate from your own. So then we have to bring into our way of understanding the world what is the purpose of life. The ego, which is the infinite self identified with the limitations imposed upon us when we enter into one body. And so ego is not an enemy, it's just a fact of life. We are the infinite spirit, we take birth in one body, we become responsible for that body. The experience of being in that body begins to dominate our self-definition, and we tend to lose track of our unity. We live more on the tips of our fingers rather than from the source of who we are. So from that perspective, now just a moment, let me find the thought I was going to say. Oh yes, from that perspective, what we think of as good is that it's easy and pleasurable. I mean, really just think about it. Every time you use the word good karma, good day, good experience, I mean, it almost is always things went the way that I wanted them to go. When we get a terrible diagnosis from the doctor, when our money is, we open our bank account and realize that somebody's hacked in and taken our money, when the person that we were relying upon proves to be unreliable, we always consider that bad, don't we? Because now it's going to be challenging, it's not going to be easy, it's not going to be pleasurable. And all my expectations and my story, my script for how my story is supposed to go, nobody's following that script. We call that bad. However, if we were reading an exciting novel, and maybe we've already read to the end of the book and we know it's going to come out well, and we're in the part where the hero or the heroine is being really challenged and has to dig deep and has to find their way and has to overcome obstacles and has to manage to get up the mountain, we could just consider that, oh, it's just an amazing part of the story, and we're cheering for the hero and cheering for the heroine and trying to get them through. And then when they finally succeed, it's so glorious because they have faced into it and triumphed. But when it's our own lives, we feel quite different about that. So then we have to ask the question, is there a higher purpose to suffering? And this is where honest introspection has to play into it. I'm not fond of suffering. I really much prefer that I not. I find it almost unbearable when people I care about are suffering. It's very, very difficult. But beneath all of that, I know from my own experience that the worst things that have happened to me have forced me to grow, to expand my understanding, to open my heart, to learn things that I would never have been able to learn. The most valuable lessons in my life have come to me from, quote, the worst things that happened to me. So were they really the worst? You see how confusing it gets? But of course it's very challenging because you have to add in a whole world view. You have to have some inner experience of a transcendent reality that we are all part of. You have to have direct experiences in which things go badly and then they turn out to have gone well, but you just didn't know it. You have to have a great deal of courage to believe that the karma that comes to other people is going to help them, and you have to have a great deal of belief that just as you have been capable of facing difficulties in your life, they're capable too. That you're not the only person in the world who has the potential to be able to rise to the occasion, and that you have to have faith in other people, and then you have to ask the question, what will really help? And then that's how you decide what will help. Will I go and just weep and wail and rail at the universe? Shall I collapse into a helpless heap here because of all their suffering? Or is there something I can actually bring to other people that will help give them the courage, hopefully the faith in God, and the ability to access the power within themselves that'll take them through this chapter to the next, to the next, to the glorious end of the story.
Thank you, Asha. There's another question from someone here in the audience. Hello, why do we come into life not knowing the universe's truth? Is that true? If that truth is essential to our growth?
Yes, that is. There's so many, all the questions, no matter how you phrase them, they all end up being the same question. And the question is, why is it the way it is? And there's lots of clever answers to that. Swami Vivekananda said, the level of consciousness that asks the question cannot perceive the answer. Why did God make the world the way he made it? Well, you have to realize God before you'll know what God does. They're all clever, but they're not really very satisfactory answers. But the dilemma that's presented by that, why don't we know, it's sort of like this. We are in prison. And whether we're guilty or innocent and who put us here and whether the prosecutors were honest or whether somebody fiddled with the evidence, who knows? But we are in prison. We're imprisoned by the conditions of and the limits of our own consciousness. And we have examples of those who are free. We look out the window of the prison and we see great avatars and we see great masters. We see Jesus Christ, we see Krishna, we see Buddha, we see those who have completely transcended the limitations of this prison, even to the point of being able to, turn water into wine, or transcend the dead, or walk on water, or make the blind see. I mean, they make a mockery of the prison that we're in, and they all say to us, that which I do ye shall do in greater things. Be ye therefore perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. My devotee is never lost. They just tell us over and over again that there are answers and we can find them. And we have, as human beings, we have the freedom either to continue to insist on a certain narrow perspective and try to make it work within that perspective, or if we spend enough incarnations doing that, we finally begin to ask the questions differently. I mean, you can ask exactly the same questions in two ways. You can say, God, why are you doing this? Or you can say, God, why are you doing this? And of course, when you ask those questions in two different ways, you get two very different responses. So for some reason, and I don't know why, for some reason we have to work very, very hard in order to first even to care, then to motivate ourselves, then to discipline ourselves to just keep persevering on this path of discerning that which is merely an illusion and that which is merely the truth behind it. And every saint and every master and every God-attuned, deeply God-attuned person ever throughout all of human history, as their consciousness has risen and as they have begun to understand what we have forgotten, they always say, oh, it was right. That was the only way. There was no other possibility. So at a certain point, I have a very independent mind. I'm just not able to just say, yes, when I don't understand. So I followed, Swami Kriyananda is my teacher, and he's been the perfect example. He read Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda in 1948. That book was not published until 1946. He read it. Swami Kriyananda was 22 years old, extremely intelligent, independent thinker. He felt something from Yogananda. He recognized him as his guru. And of course you have to add in past lives to make this work. Within 1 week from being an independent young man in New York City, he was in Los Angeles kneeling in front of Yogananda and saying, I want to be your disciple. And Swami Kriyananda says, even as those words came out of his mouth, he was astonished because never in his life did he ever anticipate meeting anyone. He didn't know such a person existed, and then actually asking for that kind of guidance. So afterwards, he said he was literally dizzy a lot of the time, because now he's living in an ashram, he's been initiated as a monk, he's a disciple, all these things are happening. His whole world is turning up and down. But this is how he described it. He said, I accepted Master's words unhesitatingly, but not unquestioningly. And he said he always had to start from the premise, he knows what he's doing, because in his heart he knew that Yogananda was a true God-realized master. He said, I knew what he was doing. I knew he had an intention, but what is it? And so that's how you have to approach it. Instead of just lamenting that it's lost, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I am here to learn? Just always, what is it that I'm here to learn? And then set about learning it. And then everything else will come clear.
Beautiful. Thank you, Asha. Our next question is there an end of reincarnation?
Yes, reincarnation has a purpose. Reincarnation is, we keep coming back. When I asked Swamiji this question, about reincarnation, his answer was there are two things that cause us to reincarnate over and over again: longing and regret. And remember those words and spend some time meditating on it. When we exit from this body, our consciousness goes with us, and the whole pattern, this is the reincarnation, and the chakras are tied like this. The chakras is the energy pattern within us that is formed. It's a constantly changing energy pattern. Every thought, every action, every emotion that we have creates a vibration of energy, and that vibration of energy is stored in the chakras. Karma is stored in the chakras. When the body dies, the chakras are an energy field. That energy field moves with us. And so over the course of a lifetime, perhaps we were desperately in love with someone who never wanted to be with us. And so we die with this deep longing to be with them. And that vibration of longing, and it can be specific to be with that soul, or it can be the vibration of longing to have a close, romantic, happy, intimate relationship. It's longing. So we move into an energy universe, but we're not content in that energy universe, because the pattern in our chakras is saying, I want, I want, I want. Just like you're sitting at home and you decide, I'm going to spend the evening, doing yoga, and then I'm going to read a few inspiring books, and then I'm going to go to bed early so I can get up early. And then somewhere in the middle of all of that, I want a pizza, I want a pizza, I want a pizza. And pretty soon you find yourself, you've gotten up from your house and you're walking out to buy the pizza, or at least you're on your phone to have it delivered. You're not content. I want, I want. So we get out of this body, we go into the astral world, the energy universe, a beautiful universe. Everything is fine except I want, I want. And then pretty soon that I want brings us back to try again. Now the opposite is, oh, if only I had gotten there in time, if only I had said yes to Harold instead of saying yes to Robert, if only. Or worse than that, I was estranged from my mother, I never understood, if only. If you regret, you deeply regret. It's a pattern in your chakras, you go in the astral world, oh, if only, and then all of a sudden you come back. And at a certain point, we have understood that my life belongs to God. I will strive only to be in tune with the divine. I will accept God's will. I will not rebel against reality. I will understand what is really trying to happen. And so what happens is we don't keep planting in our chakras longings and regrets, because we resolve them, we transcend them, we behave properly, we see them in a bigger proportion. We surrender ourselves to God. We trust ourselves and what happened. Countless words you can put on it. But the point is, then when we come out of our body and we go into the energy universe, our chakras are at peace. There's no I want, if only, I want, if only. And then we can begin to progress. They're higher worlds than just the astral, but we don't have to keep reincarnating physically, because there's nothing in us that needs a physical body to resolve it. Okay?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Our next question is intuition guidance from above or angels or spirit?
Every thought that we have, we do not create our own thoughts. This is one of the very interesting, simple statements. Its implications often overlooked, which are in Autobiography of a Yogi. He says it essentially in these words: our thoughts are not individually created. It's not me, Asha, and all her little foibles, who creates my thoughts. We receive our thoughts according to the vibration of consciousness that we're on. There are universal vibrations of awareness, of goodness, of darkness. And when we start vibrating on that level, then we receive ideas and thoughts from that level. So, for example, if you're with someone who has a very, who's depressed and is very preoccupied with their own failures, their own limitations, has a very negative attitude toward life and people, and you perhaps are a very positive person, or at least are having a positive day, the two of you walk out, you go and you see this world all around you, you have all these experiences. The person who's inclined to be depressed, everything supports the idea that I have to be depressed and everything about me is wrong. And on this side, everything supports the fact that it's a beautiful universe and I'm doing really well. Same people, just moving the same way, but they're tuned into different radio stations. We're just tuned into radio stations. In other words, whatever vibration of consciousness it's dominant within us, will be supported by the energy of the universe. This is Einstein. This is not even religion. This is just, it's an energy universe. And we're always living in these different fields of energy. So what do we do about that? What we do about that is we ask ourselves, what am I feeding myself? What am I deliberately choosing to bring into my consciousness? What am I attuning to? And nowadays, with the very device that I'm using to talk to you, we can access all these different vibrations at all times. We can sit there and in 5 minutes, we can see anger, we can see suffering, we can see despair, we can see Paramahansa Yogananda, we can hear beautiful chanting, we can hear Bach, we can hear Mozart, we can hear the most enraged, downward pulling kind of performances by people. We can see, and all of this, it becomes who we are. What the influences that we attune ourselves to and take in, they stay with us. They don't pass through. I mean, just think about it. Recently, I saw a short dramatic clip, and in the middle of the night, I woke up sort of worried about that character, and I had to stop and say to myself, "This character doesn't even exist. This is just a fictional character." But I had watched it, and it was so well done that now that person's dilemma had become real to me in my subconscious mind. Wow, I need to be more conscientious about what I'm willing to take into my consciousness. So we attune ourselves by deliberate practice to higher and higher vibrations. And then the intuitive thoughts that will come to us, the feeling thoughts that will come to us, will be in tune with what we have been trying to achieve within ourselves. Now, sometimes we feel something, and it's not really coming from a more expanded point of view. It's just consistent with who I already am. Our subconscious mind is a collection of everything that we already are. Our superconscious is the potential that we can expand into and become. And so the word intuition needs to also be qualified, because we can get subconscious intuition. this matches exactly who I am. It feels right. People will use that phrase a lot. Sure, it feels right because it's exactly who you are and it matches exactly. So the question is, what is my goal? Is my goal to just repeat who I am because I'm content with who I am? Or is my goal to seek superconscious inspiration so that I can expand into a potential that I haven't yet realized? And we're always being caught between these two realities, and which way we go depends on what we attune ourselves to, what we bring into our consciousness, what the vibration of what we bring in is how it's changing us. Because you see, it's an energy universe, and the stronger energy just takes over the lower energy. That's how it works. See, there's so many fascinating subtleties to these. I have given hundreds of hours of classes on my YouTube channel. I highly encourage you to go there because there's so much more that can be said about this. And if you really want to understand it, take the time. Take the time to educate yourself so you have a little bit of a perspective that you can begin to work with and apply your own experience to it and then expand your awareness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Asha. Our next question is, how is childhood abuse karma? Someone is saying, I can't get past this.
I completely sympathize with you. Once again, almost always when we start talking about karma, the question comes of what happens to children. And of course, it's an unbearable answer to say, well, it's the right thing for that to happen to them. So that's why the teaching of karma and the teaching of reincarnation is very, 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 very challenging. And I make no effort to compel you or even to persuade you to accept it, because you're going to end up faced with things that seem so unfair. So unfair. What are we supposed to do with that? However, if, and these are, to me, these are not questions anymore, if there is a loving power in this universe, if there is a divine order to the universe, if everything that happens to us is an opportunity for us to grow into the light, and if everything that comes to us is a gift from a loving divine mother sent to us because it's the right size opportunity for us to face into something that may be very difficult to face into, but when we do that, we will be enlightened, we will be expanded, and levels of greatness and joy and compassion and ability to serve others will come to us. Do we ever learn lessons through suffering that we could not learn in any other way? Now you have to bear in mind that children are helpless and have very little capacity to influence their own destiny. So they appear absolutely to be victims. There's no question about that. But if the principle of karma is true anywhere, it has to be true everywhere. And think of karma like this. Karma is an opportunity to learn something about what brings happiness and what causes suffering on an eternal template. Not just, well, of course it hurts when someone pokes me with something sharp, but what really causes suffering, what really brings happiness from the divine perspective that is trying to be communicated to us, and an opportunity to learn a very deep and hard lesson. Is that a punishment or a blessing? And that's, there is no other way to come to a satisfactory answer to that question. And for many incarnations, we just rebel. We're just angry. We're angry at what happened to us. We're angry at what happened to other people. We may become righteous in trying to prevent others from being hurt, which is a very valid response. All of that is true, but all of it leaves us unsatisfied. And so at a certain point, instead of saying, God, what are you doing? We start saying, God, what are you doing? And then we have to have great courage and imagination especially. We have to be able to be creative enough to consider possibilities we haven't seen before. I send you to my YouTube channel because these questions are very subtle. And then you have to decide inside yourself, how driven am I to reconcile all these seemingly contradictory things? You know, I was driven. I was driven from a very young age and given a very sharp mind that just could not accept superficial answers. And I was driven, and because I was driven, I was drawn to what I've been drawn to. And it doesn't make me any more comfortable or at ease or less heartbroken at what people have to go through. It's partly because it's unbearable what we have to go through. And therefore, I'm seeking a way to be of help. And that desire to help motivated me. That was my childhood and my young life. I want to be helpful, but I don't know how to be helpful. How can I be helpful? And that's what brought me here. That's what brought me as deep as I've gotten into this teaching, because it answered the question and gave me a way.
Thank you. So another question from somewhere here is, can a son who took his own life be interpreted as a mother's karma as well? But there are also some other questions similar, like, is karma something I must suffer through because I deserve it, or is there a way to transform it?
Okay, the word deserve is a really interesting word, because we use the word deserve both as a condemnation and also as a commendation. Oh, if anybody deserved to get the lead in the play, they really deserved it. They've worked so hard. Look how talented they are. Boy, did they ever deserve what happened to them. You know, it's both ways. You say that, which is to say, it's an appropriate response. You've earned that opportunity. So once again, when something extraordinarily challenging happens to us that just breaks apart the comfortable world that we're living in, like a child committing suicide, one just is going along in the world with a certain expectation, and every bit of that expectation is blown to bits in the most unthinkable way of suffering. I mean, when your own child dies at all, but dies by their own hand, I mean, I can't even imagine. So, are you being punished, or are you being given the opportunity to go deeper into realities that you would not even have considered otherwise, such as karma, reincarnation, the presence of God, the eternal nature of the soul, the necessity to learn? All of those things are there. Just a moment, there was a thought that's slipping away from me. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yes. Many years ago, when I was leading retreats at our Expanding Light, it wasn't even called that then, it was the meditation retreat, a woman came from Sweden to learn from us what we had to teach. At that time, people didn't travel nearly as much, so her coming from Sweden was very big. This was the story she told. I was the one she met, and I was working with her. She had a sister who was very close to her in age. They absolutely adored each other. They planned their whole lives together. They decided they would marry brothers. They would live next door to each other. They would raise their children together. You know, as little girls do fantasize about their future. Everything was all planned out. This woman was probably in her mid-20s when I met her. In her early 20s, her sister got cancer, and her sister died. And this woman that I'm talking to, of course, is weeping as she tells me. Everything that they had planned, as far as she was concerned, had been destroyed. She said because her suffering was deeper than anything she'd ever experienced, she prayed to God in ways she'd never imagined being able to pray. She prayed with such intensity that she received a divine response that she again did not know was possible. That divine response had awakened her to an entirely different way of looking at the world, which led her to autobiography, which caused her to fly from Sweden to California to be sitting there talking to me. Now she's telling me also about the experiences of God that she's had, the pictures that she's seen of the nature of life, the possibility of divine happiness. At the same time, she still weeps when she talks about her sister. But all of this is opened up to her that was never there before. Thank God, I think I was inspired literally. I said, given all of that, would you say the death of your sister was a tragedy for you or a blessing? And of course there was no answer. And it was a terrible risk that I took. She could have become enraged with me. But she just silently just put her hands up. How do you answer the question? Because yes, of course, on one level it was, but look at what came from it. So the mother whose son took his own life, the karma for suicide it's variable. It depends on what consciousness was motivating the person when they did it. And suicide is an unfortunate mistake, but that's all it is. It's just an unfortunate mistake. The difficulty with suicide is it doesn't work. A person commits suicide thinking they will escape from being themselves, and all they escape from is the body they were wearing. Whatever consciousness they had at that moment, they still have it, and whatever issues they were trying to avoid, they still have them, and so they just get to go on and work with it. And was it the mother's karma? Yes, of course, but not karma in the sense of I caused it or I'm being punished or anything like that. Karma is an opportunity to learn a deep lesson that you didn't already know. So your son and you were drawn together because both of you have deep lessons that you don't already know. Painful as that is, if it is the opportunity to transcend limitation and then to be of benefit to others, is it a curse or is it a blessing? You see how hard it is to answer?
Thank you, Asha, for that beautiful answer. We have one more question. Is forgiveness possible without reconciliation?
Forgiveness is entirely a matter of your own heart. Another person doesn't have to accept it. Nobody has to change for you to change. That's the thing that we have to understand. The only thing that we have actual influence over is our own state of inner consciousness. And the misery of life is that we're constantly trying to make the world around us match what we think it ought to be. We spend literally thousands of incarnations trying to make it behave. It never will. Finally, it occurs to us that maybe I'm trying to do this incorrectly. And we begin to work on our own inner consciousness. So yes, you can be in a terrible situation with someone. And if you yourself learn what the karma is trying to teach you, and therefore can put the karma behind you, which is another way of saying forgiveness. There's a better word than forgiveness, and that word is just to accept it. It's just, I accept. This is what happened. I accept. This is how you behaved, because it seemed like a good idea to you to behave this way. Forgive still implies that I am in the righteous position, but I am going to be nice enough to allow your awfulness, not to define me anymore. Real forgiveness is simply to accept that this is what happened, and to be able to say perfectly clearly, your behavior was unthinkable. What could you possibly have been imagining that made you think that was a good idea? But you did, and I can't control you. I can only control myself, and I do not want my life to be defined by regret over what's happening or longing to get revenge on you. I just want to say, I want to put it behind me. And whether that other person ever sees what you see, first of all, it's absolutely beyond your control. It's not your karma. It doesn't make any difference. If you have resolved it and don't have to face the same situation again, and they have not resolved it, and maybe even they're still mad at you, but there's no you there for the karma to cling to, then they will have to go through what they have to go through to learn it, but they will learn it with someone else. A surrogate will come in, someone who has the karma to have that experience, but it doesn't have to be you. So yes, you can be completely free, which is what we're talking about, moving beyond the word forgiveness. I've just accepted it, I'm at peace with it, I'm free. I don't need this lesson again because I've learned the lesson of compassion and divine love and trust in God that this karma was intended to give me, and whether anybody else learns it or not is between them and God. It's not between them and me anymore.
Asha, thank you so much. There's one more question here, actually.
Okay.
It says, how can I connect with my young son who passed 9 years ago? He's the only child.
You see, these are the hardest issues, aren't they? The consciousness that is your son, the consciousness that manifested as your son, the jiva is the word, the individual spark of spirit that came into that body and was your son for the period of time that he was, still exists and is out there having its adventures. If your son had grown to his natural term, I don't know how old he was when he died, but if your son goes off to college, he doesn't live in your house anymore and you don't see him every day, but he's out there having adventures. It's more dramatic when a person leaves their body altogether, but they're still out there, they're having adventures. You're just not, they're not under your roof anymore and you don't see them anyway, every day. So the heart connection that's between you, the true love that's between you is eternal. The form of that love, I'm the mother, you're the child, was only created by the physical bodies that you were in, and that physical body relationship is gone. Now you're just soul to soul. Now here's a very, very important point. Whatever the karma of your child was, to be your child as that child, whether he grew to be a grown-up or died as a very young one, that whole incarnation is over for them. That identification as my name, my body, my age, this is my family, this is my mother, it's done, he's finished. Okay, that does not mean the tie of love and friendship between you that caused you to be his mother and him to be your child, that part is eternal. But the definition you're putting on the relationship, that I'm the mother, he's the son, that's over. And here's the hard part that's most important. You mustn't try to keep him as your son. Because, in a real sense, if your boy goes off to college and you call him every day and so I want you to come home again, I want you to sleep in the same little bed, I want to do your laundry, I want to fix your food, all of those things, your son in college is going to have to push you away or put a block between you so that he can go on and do what he needs to do for his own growth. Your child, the karma for him of being that person in that way is over. So you have to give him the freedom to continue to expand and to go on with who he's trying to be. And if you want to be in right connection to him and make it beneficial for him to stay connected to you, you have to bless him in his freedom. And the more you can bless him in his freedom and be happy for him that he's on to new experiences, the more likely it is that he will be able to share his energy with you. If your energy is always trying to pull him back, then it will, in it of its own nature, create a block between you. So be happy for him. Wake up every morning thinking about, I wonder what wonderful worlds he's in. I wonder if he's reincarnated somewhere. I wonder if he's having a really good time. And then imagine him having a wonderful time and thank him for being your son and thank him for making you a mother and be joyfully communicating to him all the wonderful things that you've learned, since he was with you. The more uplifting and expansive you can make your inner relationship with him, the more it will be blessed and made real.
All right, my friends, now let me tell you, if you feel what we're doing is worth doing, you can help us keep doing it. You can help us through Patreon. You can become a member of YouTube. You can support us through Instagram. And all of those things make it possible for us to just keep broadcasting and devoting our time to really sharing these teachings. So if you feel inspired, please help us in that way. If you like all these questions on Instagram, there's a whole Ask Asha channel that you can find. And all of my YouTube classes can be of help to you. And I consider myself very fortunate to be able to share with you through these broadcasts. Thank you so much for joining.